Hail and well met, brave adventurers. My name is DM Bob Yo, and in this quick video, I'm going to spend a little time with you looking at Fantasy Grounds, learning the interface, understanding how it's used as a player, so that you can connect to one of my games that I'm running or another DM that might be running a Dungeons and Dragons game on Fantasy Grounds. So let me say real quick, make sure and visit me on the web and social media, DM Bob Yo. You can find all my stuff just with that typically. And so let's just go ahead and get into it, shall we? All right, so here we have the Fantasy Grounds main page. This is the launch page that you get when you open the Fantasy Grounds application. So you're going to just click Join Campaign, and then in the Join Cloud Game GM name search box, you're going to type in your Dungeon Master's name, and the campaign that they have running currently will be listed below. You can double click or you can click on it and hit Start. You'll then get a message about attempting resolved connection to server, acquiring files list. Now, if it hangs up on acquiring files list for 30 or 40 seconds, don't be too worried. If it goes more than that, you probably want to close out of Fantasy Grounds and come back in. But as long as you can see progress on the bar like we have right now, then it's loading appropriately, and before too long, you'll be into Fantasy Grounds. So while we're waiting for that to load, I will also mention that Fantasy Grounds from the DM side, I will be putting out a tutorial video on that within the next couple of weeks. So if you're a dungeon master, make sure and look out for that. I do feel like Fantasy Grounds is easier on both the player and DM side than some of the competitions such as Roll20 and Foundry. Mainly, it has a significant amount of more of automation, which we'll see before too long. Okay, so we get the main screen, main Fantasy Grounds screen, and we'll start with the campaign setup. We're just going to close that. We don't need that at all. So the first thing we need to do is claim our character, and the character that I've prepared for today is Valvry Wasanthi, a Knight of Sinlu, a drow. So I'm just going to double click, and it opens up the character sheet. Now, let me do one thing here real quick. If you're on a monitor with a larger resolution, you might have trouble reading some of the print. So what you can do is you can go over here to the text box, and there's a command you can type, / scale UI space, and then a number. 100 represents 100% the current view of the screen. 130, for example, will make things a little bit bigger. And I'm going to leave it at that, actually, so it's easier to see on video for us today. But if you're on a 4K monitor, my clients that have 4K monitors tell me that 200 is not uncomfortable. So again, that command, / scale UI. And sorry, one word, and then a number. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the character sheet for a minute. Now, the first thing that you'll see is if you've had your Dungeon Master load your character into Fantasy Grounds, you might have a blank portrait, or you might have a portrait other than what you'd like. So to change that portrait, you double click on the portrait in the upper left-hand corner. Opens up a bag, a data bag. Double click on that. And depending on what tokens you have loaded or purchased for Fantasy Grounds, you may find various options here. I have quite a few, obviously, because I use Fantasy Grounds quite regularly. But you might just have fantasy portraits and perhaps FG Fantasy and perhaps Smiteworks. So let's go into FG Fantasy, because that's one that you will have access to for sure. And so we see there are some generic types portraits of all sorts of species, lots of humans, of course. Everything from lizard men to monster-looking tokens and orcs, all right, all sorts of things. I'm just going to go back up. There's a couple of dark elves right here. I think we'll just take this one here. Good portrait for Valkyrie. All right, and so you'll see on the character sheet here, this area in the center, you have all of your stats and abilities and everything. So on the left-hand side, you have your abilities. If the DM wants you to make an ability check, you're going to come over here. So the DM might say, give me a dexterity check. So there are two ways you can do that. You can double-click on dexterity, and it will roll the dice. Alternatively, you can use what one of my customers calls the Thanos hand. Click and hold the dice, drag it over here, and drop it. All right, makes the check that way. Sometimes DM might want you to make a roll in secret where you don't know the results. So what you'll do is, instead of dragging it over here to the chat, I'm going to drag this wisdom check into the dice tower. And you'll see it doesn't tell me the result. It only tells the DM. So left-hand side, you have your abilities. Right-hand side, your saves. To make a Constitution save, just double-click. Or use the Thanos hand to drop into the text chat. So you have other things here, of course. You have your passive perception, your armor class, your initiative, and you'll roll initiative from there. Same thing, double-click or click and drag. You've got your hit points down here, your wounds, temporary hit points. During a rest, if you need to recover hit points, you can roll these hit dice by double-clicking on it. Okay. Obviously, you didn't need to do that, so it did not take one away because this character is at full hit points. So let's look next at skills. Same thing over here. Go to your bonus, make an acrobatic skill check, boom. All right, DM says, give me a stealth check in the tower. So you don't know the results of your own stealth check, which, let's be honest, do we usually anyway? No. We see the shadow of the dice rolling, and we don't know what we got. And again, you can double click, make a perception check. There you go. Now we're going to skip all the way down to actions. The rest of these tabs just sort of have all of our other information so that it's handy. And we can use those to reference. But we go to Actions tab, we'll see a few things. First, at the top, we'll see our weapons. And so Valkyrie has a light crossbow. Roll the attack roll, I can double click. Even takes one of my ammunition away, one of my crossbow bolts. Or I can click and drag. Tracks my ammunition again, of course. If I hit, which is 24 better, then I'm going to roll the damage. Either double click or click and drag. Now, I'm going to look at magic for a moment. When you come down to your spells, initially you may not see everything expanded like this. It may look more along these lines. So, for example, if you want to cast a firebolt, you're going to open it up with the magnifying glass on the right-hand side here. And you're just going to hit the cast button. Look here, we see we got a 9. Oh, that doesn't hit. Maybe the next round, cast it again. Finally, with a 22, you're going to hit. So to roll the damage, same thing here, click and drag. Or double click, either way. Sorry, single click actually on the spell items. There are some spells such as mage armor that affect yourself or that have an effect rather than a damage. For those, you're going to open up the magnifying glass as I just did, and you can take that effect, the little white box with the walking man, click and drag. You can drag that up onto your portrait and it will automatically add to your armor class. As we can see, we have our dex bonus, and then we've added 3 from the spell. All right. Now, I will note, when you cast a spell, it does not automatically use up a spell slot up here. So you need to make sure and check the circle. So we cast a firebolt. That didn't cost us anything. That's a cantrip. But we did cast also Mage Armor. That's a first level spell. And then we cast, oh, that's it, just Mage Armor and Firebolt. But we could cast Scorching Ray. Boom. And a 15 might hit, so roll the damage. Just a single click there. All right. Again, or click and drag. And since we used a second level spell, we'll mark it off. All right. If you need to know what anything means, you want to reference the rules text for a particular spell or item, you simply click on the red box with the white dragon. We can see that what Blade Ward does exactly. We can see how Poison Spray works. Check the casting time, whether it requires verbal somatic components, whatever we need. There are different views that you can play with, mode. You can go into preparation mode, which shows you your spell slots. You can go into combat mode, which automatically opens up certain things. But really, standard is really kind of the easiest way to do it. So that's the long and short of working your way through the character sheet. Now, let's see what it's like when there's an actual combat or an actual encounter, how that works. So we're going to go ahead and close the character sheet, and I'm going to go ahead and bring my UI scale back down to 100%. So your GM might share a map with you, and when they do, it will appear on your screen. I recommend that players always start out, you've got these 3 options up here, X, question mark, and up arrow. Start out with the up arrow, because with the up arrow, you can then open up your character sheet over top of the map and have both open. Otherwise, what happens is sometimes you lose your character sheet completely because it's back behind there. So you have to fiddle around and move windows. And so I definitely recommend that up arrow so it's in the back. Now, how do you move in and out on the map? Your center mouse button will let you scroll in. If you click and hold your center mouse button, it will let you pan. You can also use the compass down in the lower right-hand corner here. Pan left, right, up, and down. So we're going to go ahead and scroll in pretty much all the way. Now our Dungeon Master might set line of sight, which means that we can only see certain things. All right, so to move around the board, we just click and drag our token. Okay. Explore a little bit, see what everything looks like. Go over here and come get a drink. You can also move around using the arrow keys on your keyboard. Right, down, left, up, or you can click and drag. Now, what happens when there's an actual opponent? Well, that's going to look a lot like this. Well, I say it's going to look a lot like this, and then I've got to wait a moment because on my Dungeon Master side on Fantasy Grounds, I had to load the correct module. There they are now. So hobgoblins, not hobgoblins. So combat time. So DM says roll initiative, so Valveri's going to go in, main tab, and I'll just double click, roll my initiative. So if I want to know whose turn it is, I'm going to open up Combat Tracker. I open that up with the 2 crossed swords in the upper left-hand corner. And I can see that I actually have highest initiative, thanks to my wonderful roll. So I get to go first. The DM says, Valveri, you are up. All right, what do I want to do? Well, go to my Actions tab. What have I got here? Do I want to start off with something powerful like Scorching Ray? You know what? Why not? Why not? Let's do some Scorching Ray. Now, Scorching Ray, we look at the rules text, creates 3 rays of fire, and you hurl them at targets. So I'm going to cast. Now there's 2 ways to do this. First one, and I'm going to attack all 3 of these guys, by the way, 1, 2, 3. The first way to do it is to use the Thanos hand to grab the cast dice and drop it on a target. And I can see that I get a 10, so that's going to be a miss. Now, the next way to do it is to hold down the Control key on your keyboard and left-click on the target. You'll see that creates a line. It tells you how far away the target is. And you'll also see in the Combat Tracker it says Targets Hobgoblin 2. So we'll hit Cast at Hobgoblin 2. That's a hit. Very nice. So all we have to do, hit the damage button. All right, heavy damage. Now, to unselect a target, we just Control and click again. So the third ray, let's use the Thanos hand to attack Hobgoblin 1 with a miss. Now the other way, had that been a hit on Hobgoblin 1, let's pretend that it was, we could use the Thanos hand to drop the damage onto his token. And that way, even though we didn't Control click, we don't have him selected as a target, the damage goes to him. Now, you'll see that you can't track your opponent's hit points, but you do see how damaged they are inside the Combat Tracker. All right. So, when you're done with your turn, you hit the down button. Turn complete. And maybe all of your opponents are, all of your friends are complete. And now it's Mr. Hobgoblin's turn. He's out for revenge. So Hobgoblin 1 is not going to waste any time. He's going to come up here. And he's going to fire at you with his longbow. Now, depending on your DM, you may or may not be able to see the result of the attack. That one's a miss. So, Hobgoblin 2 is going to fire on you with his longbow. That one is a miss. Hobgoblin 3 will step out of the shadows and attack you with his longbow. One of these is going to hit. You watch. That'll miss. So Hobgoblin 4. And even if this one misses, I'm going to go ahead and do damage. We'll pretend that it hit. Actually, that will, you know what, here. He's just going to keep attacking. He's got superpowers. All right. Finally a hit. All right. So he rolls his damage. And you'll see, you scroll up in the Combat Tracker, you've taken 5 wounds. You don't even have to track it. It's all done for you. Now, combat's over. Party is victorious. Congratulations. You want to take a short rest, spend a hit dice. Just double click on that. And you gain 1 hit point, and it lowers your hit dice. And really, that's the important stuff. If you're unconscious, there are death saving throws here that you can make, that sort of thing. And we made one, so we'll mark that as a success. I want to point out one other thing in the options menu up here. That's your little gear icon. Some players have difficulty when the turn order switches to them because it moves their map around, and it's hard sometimes you have to pan back out, scroll back out, and pan in, or excuse me, to find where you're at. So I always recommend they turn options off for the auto center map. And you have an option if you don't want it to make a ringing noise and all sorts of other things, but most of those are DM options. Okay, really that's the extent of it. I'll show you, I guess, one or two more things while we're here. So we can look at all your equipment, your inventory, and you want to know what something is. Click on it and you say, hey, I've got Elven Chain, sweet. Okay. Any of your items, you can do that. You track your gold down here. Automatically calculates encumbrance. Now, there are occasions, excuse me, you would hope anyway, there are occasions where you're going to get magic items and such. So the way that you're going to have access to those is through your party sheet. Come in here, you can see you and any other members of your party. Right now it's just you. And your DM might drop a parcel. So you click on inventory, and here are all the things that the group has found. Now let me put another member in your group, a member or two, just to make it interesting. Put Kogan and Arfane. They're both there as well. All right. So you currently have 15 gold pieces. As a party, you say, oh, look, there's a ring of warmth. Someone gets that. And maybe Valkyrie wants it. And maybe the group decides that that's just fine. So to get that ring of warmth, use the Thanos hand to grab the red box and drop it into your inventory. And you'll see, right there it is. Click on it for the information. When wearing it, you have resistance to cold. You're unharmed by temperatures as low as 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can also make sure that all of your items are equipped, carried, equipped, not carried. All right. Now your DM says, okay, all that's left is a bunch of gems and statues and artwork and that sort of thing, a golden ring. So the DM says, you want to sell it. Party agrees to do so. You make some rolls and maybe you sell it at 50% of the value. So the DM on their end sells them and it automatically calculates everything, adds in the gold. To divide the gold, the DM simply hits the right button and we'll see that Kogan, Arfane, and of course Valkyrie are going to get 317 gold, 66 copper, 216 silver, which suddenly are right here. Okay, I think that's going to just about do it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this little excursion through Fantasy Grounds. I look forward to playing with you. Make sure you Like the video, subscribe, all that noise. Check out my websites that are listed there at the bottom of the screen, and I will see you out in the world.